We draw a parallel with football, not least because we are in the city which is famous with a good football team, and we are very close to the stadium. Now, when many years ago, when Dynamo Kiev was one of the strongest teams in Europe, they had 12 players in the USSR national team, not 11, but 12 players. And that was for a good reason. They had a 12th player, which, if I'm not mistaken, was called Vadim Yevtushenko. The guy never played in the main squad for Dynamo Kiev either, but Valery Vasilyevich took him to the national team because his belief, I believe, was that to maintain quality, you need to have the 12th player. And the parallel with think tanks and with the work we are doing and with the high quality we want to maintain is that we have to be able to have kind of reserve people to cross-check what is produced for public or for policymakers, and to be on standby if there are any mistakes to correct them before it goes public. And I'm saying that because there are occasions when things are produced by a single person without cross-checking by a good expert, but because of time pressure, because of other things those experts are doing, things don't get finalized as they should be. So it is kind of a luxury probably for most of think tanks, but it's absolutely important to have 12 players, as I named it. If I have 1 minute, I would also make a comment on a lesson that I draw from Georgian think tanks in terms of their governance or lack of governance rather. Think tanks, civil society organizations, including think tanks, are often personalized and run as one-person businesses rather than NGOs that, to me, not only should produce quality research and communicate that to policymakers and public, but also should be kind of some foundations of democracy. But what we find in reality is that people who are coming from think tanks and NGOs and then move to the government, and there are a few occasions like that, it was the same in previous government, in current government, are not less authoritarian than people who are coming from different backgrounds. And I attribute that to a lack of governance structure, because very few NGOs maintain active boards, very few think tanks have rotation of leadership, very few of them rely on many experts or many or more than one individuals who are able to produce products and appear on TV and communicate credibly those findings or policy options. So these are two things I wanted to highlight.
Thank you so much. I would like to now open the floor to a discussion. If you can please introduce yourself. І якщо можна, питання до конкретного доповідача, тому що тоді ми так зможемо більше питань задати. І якщо можна, менше коментарів, більше запитань, тому що це великий зал. Ми візьмемо декілька запитань, і якщо можна, зразу адресувати їх до когось.
Адресувати?
Будь ласка.
Сказати кому? Сказати кому? Адресувати розумію, але I actually wanted to use this opportunity, I'll speak English for a change. I want to use this opportunity to add one more lesson learned, if I wish, and relate it to our report. So, not a question really. So the one lesson I have is, and I said it before, I just want to emphasize, don't oversell and underdeliver. It's kind of, everyone mentioned that. Don't oversell and underdeliver. Do the opposite. Now, how is it related to the report itself? Among the think tanks, or the organizations, now I'll be precise in my words, among the organizations we interviewed, many were not think tanks. And this goes back to Rosa's point. You have to understand who you are, what are your strengths, are you a think tank, or are you some kind of another civil society organization, a platform for discussion, a polling organization, a facilitator. You have to understand who you are. Don't call yourself something that you are not. And part of the maybe pessimism that is pervading the report comes from the fact that we met all kinds of organizations that were not think tanks, but were pretending to be so.
Будь ласка, ще запитання з залу. Максим.
Я буду говорити українською. I will speak in Ukrainian. Максим Оциб, Український незалежний центр політичних досліджень. У мене питання, як ви визначаєте порядок денний вашого аналітичного центру? От чим центр займається, а чим центр не буде займатися? Це актуальне питання для мене зараз. От попередні спікери говорили, що треба більше слухати, що хочуть люди. І я розумію, що якщо я буду формувати порядок денний з того, що хочуть люди, я вже питав, то я буду перераховувати пенсії. Пенсії вони вважають нараховані нечесно, мені треба їх якимось чином допомогти, щоб збільшити пенсію, перерахувати по-чесному. Це такий от запит. Якщо говорять більше, давайте слухати, що хочуть політики і на них працювати. Ми теж пробували, в основному політики хочуть контент-аналіз медіа, тобто що про них пишуть, в якому контексті, і от такі от вижимки. І хочуть ще рейтинги, тобто політтехнологію хочуть. А в мене в місії написано незворотність демократичних перетворень. Тобто я хотів би займатися створенням демократичної політичної системи. Закон про свободу мирних зібрань, закон про доступ до інформації, закон про громадське об'єднання, про прозорість фінансування політичних партій. От порадьте, як ви формуєте свої порядки денні, як ви вибираєте і балансуєте з того, що хоче, не знаю, ваше правління, напевно, керівний орган вашого фонду, звичайні люди і політичні суб'єкти. Як ви це балансуєте? Як ви визначаєте? Дякую. І донори. Не забувайте, що є донори. Дякую.
Там запитання в першому ряді.
Ми візьмемо декілька запитань, потім відповідь.
Олександр Кілієвич, Інститут аналізу політики і стратегії та Національна академія державного управління. Перше, я хотів би коротку репліку кинути. У нас якось вийшло, що різними мовами про різні речі йдеться. Сам звіт назван Policy Relevant Research і звіт переклад адекватний дослідження політики. А потім по тексту в українському лише варіанті виліз аналіз політики, що дещо відмінне policy analysis і policy study. Це дещо відмінні речі, хоч є перетин, і відповідно різні замовлення. Це я хотів, не було можливості до першої сесії, може вже в кулуарах переговорити з цього приводу, подискутувати. А питання конкретне, може, до представників Грузії і Польщі. Чи можна навести приклад позитивний саме в дослідженнях, не дослідженнях, а проведенні аналізу політики, коли, скажімо, громадська організація залучилась до критики проєкту урядового рішення, і ця критика була сприйнята, рішення було скасовано. Чи є такі приклади?
Now we come back to the panel. First question on the how do you define your research agenda? How do you balance between the board, the demand, and funders? And the question on success stories.
Thank you. Very good questions. They're all very interconnected. I mean, how do you determine your agenda depends on what you are, what you want to do, where your professionalism stands. And I think it's best to build on that. And not build on requests from government and not even from public opinion, to be honest. I think think tanks need to be ahead of the curve, not behind the curve. But of course, there are compromises to be made. First of all, the competence of the people you're working with. I mean, to be perfectly honest, there are certain topics I don't cover, not because I'm not interested in them, simply because I don't have that expertise or I don't have the staff. And I can't hire in the staff until I have that competence to enable me to attract projects which can bring in extra staff. So one has to work very much, on the constraints, on the internal constraints of your expertise. And in fact, try to turn them into a positive factor rather than, we are the best at this. And this other topic we just don't address. Next thing, and that's the compromise with donors and so on. The next thing is look at what is on the policy agenda. What is going to be discussed in Parliament in 6 months' time? What is going to come up in a year and a half time? Think ahead of what's going to be coming up, because then you can start preparing the grounds to do some research, to come up with some innovative ideas, that other things that other people are not saying, ahead of the moment in which the decisions are made. So you're preparing yourself to be central to the debate when that debate comes. So you need to have a 6-month focus, a year or a 2-year focus. Beyond that, perhaps is too much for a think tank, especially if it's a small think tank. But have that kind of, you know, have in mind we have in mind this sort of parliamentary calendar, the calendar is institutional reform in the European Union. What's going to be, what are the global challenges that are going to come up? What is the next summit, the next EU-Russia summit? When will it be? What topics will be discussed? Prepare for those. So it's a combination of things. But it's important, I think, that the agenda is not set, certainly not by government, but it's set internally.
As regards the, well, I wanted to make one comment first about identity of think tanks, and I personally think that what think tanks, when you recognize genuine think tanks, is whether they do policy relevant research. Yes, and that's not obvious because there are many organizations which call themselves think tanks, which basically convene discussions, and sometimes they commission an occasional paper to an outside researchers and so on. And I think the field is in every country is filled of such organizations. So that's my own benchmark in a way, that you need to do research and analysis to be qualified as a genuine think tank. As I say, when I say it, it sounds obvious, but I don't think it is. Second, the agenda. I think Rosa said that, especially the last thing you said, it's very crucial. Independent think tanks, you are independent think tanks if you control your agenda. I think that's basic, but that doesn't mean you can completely conjecture your agenda out of thin air, and there are many sort of stakeholders who contribute to how it is shaped, and so you have your board, your sometimes advisory board, because we have 2 boards, and which give you some feedback into your agenda. There is the question, I think, crucial question is the question of relevance. So following the broader political agenda and then thinking how you could usefully contribute with the capacity that you have. And again, I would emphasize the question of capacity. And for most think tanks who work on project-to-project basis, there is the need to fundraise to then if you assume that we would like to do this and that, then you have to fundraise. And I think that crucial misunderstanding sometimes about think tanks which have to fundraise is that they following the donors. I mean, I think it's more complicated than that. Of course, for think tanks like my organization, you cannot deal with a topic unless you convince a donor that they should support this topic. But it doesn't really mean, it's a very different things than doing whatever the donor is telling you. And I think that this is the crucial test of the independence of a think tank, that you can set up your own agenda, but then you have to be strong enough and convincing enough to get the funding for this agenda. And the last question about stopping a government from doing something that you disagree. I think we had some examples of, I mean, most recently in Poland, there was an example of government which wanted to, I mean, most recently, a year ago, ratify the ACTA agreement that was quite famous. And here, of course, the crucial role was the scale of protests among young people, but also many governmental, non-governmental organizations which were very negative and which were normally working quite close with the government, convinced them that they should change their initial decision, and the government actually withdrew from ratifying this international document. So It was an example of both think tanks, other NGOs, and sort of general public sort of working hand in hand, and the turnover, the change of the decision was quite spectacular. There are other cases maybe where it is less obvious how much, for example, think tanks and other NGOs impacted the decisions in negative ways. That is, they stopped decisions which were stupid. I will give one example of single mandate constituencies, which there is an ongoing debate in Poland, and I think about creating those constituencies, and we've been consistently criticizing this idea, and I'm happy to say that so far we were successful, because this pseudo-reform never occurred, but of course there were other players and other reasons why it didn't come through.
If you can please keep your answers shorter,
Sorry,
so
sorry.
that we can have more questions from the audience.
Okay, I try to be very short this time. I think what is crucially important when you set the agenda is also one more thing to think about the values of the organization. That what are the, if there are any. But I think every think tank have somehow its guiding principles or values. For example, Political Capital Institute, there are just to support the policies and political forces in principle who are for free market democracy, free market capitalism and democracy. So it sounds quite vague, but even if there are a lot of, if you see to Hungary, there are a lot of developments that goes against these very principles. And for example, this is absolutely in line with what they are doing most of the time. When we are doing think tank researches, we are, for example, we have a research project on populism and the extreme right, and this is populism and extreme right are against the values of democracy and free market. And on the other hand, we have a watchdog and awareness raising and research project on the current election reform in Hungary that is also having some dangers in terms of accountability and the free and fair elections. So I think if an organization has its values, it can point towards the setting some issues on its agenda. I think the other thing that Rosa also underlined is the things should be actual or will be actual in the future and interesting for the public. If somebody, and of course should be interesting for the ones who are working in the project, because I think working in a project that you're really interested in is something that is just a waste of time, because the product by the end of the day won't have the quality, and you can't deliver it in a really credible and efficient way if you don't believe in the stuff what you are really doing. But I think what is really important, that the public should have some kind of interest in it, the political public and also the wider public, because otherwise there is if there is no real demand for this research you are doing, and even if you get some funding and support for it, I think it's something that can be really frustrating and just boring after a time. And I think one if somebody is lacking the good topics and searching for new ones to research and deal with, I think good solution can be to read a lot on the topics that he's interested in. And I think given that there are really a lot of good researches, policy researches, academic researches in a so lot of field, I think if somebody just digs deep into a topic, there are a lot new good ideas to emerge. And I think the other point that Rosa underlined is also important, to be creative and try to bring some new topics on, or at least new approaches, because I experienced the same in Hungary and everywhere, that this is increasingly competitive sector. And I think even how to deliver the findings in terms of communication channels and format and so on is something that is really important, that needs gradual and continuous innovation. Otherwise, I think political think tanks will have less and less impact, because 100 long reports is something that nobody is interested in. For example, we are putting a bit emphasis on the thing that even if we have a 100 pages long report, we have to react to the actual tendencies and happenings in the areas that we are looking at, for example, right-wing extremism and election research, and we try to be the first to prepare analysis in these issues. And if you're the first...
quickly interrupt you, because we have 1 more minute left. We have another question, and we have questions from the audience.
Okay, I just mentioned, if you're the first, then it's sure that you will get a huge interest even from the media and from the political stakeholders.
Thank you. Sorry.
Not much to add on agenda setting from my side, so I will directly move to the next question about successful examples of think tanks' influence on policies. There are examples of that from the Georgian context, and this happens unfortunately only when government changes, because these are moments when windows of opportunity opens. And I'll give you 2 examples. After the Rose Revolution, one of the most important think tanks for that time, Liberty Institute, became generator of ideas for the ruling party, and for 9 years they were participants of libertarian reforms, and they were drafting legislation, and they were amending laws, and they were making all sorts of important changes. That is, I would say, unimaginable for a single NGO in almost any country. They were so powerful. Now we have another example. There are a group of NGOs who, for many years, were writing policy papers, researches about regional development and local government development, and no one would listen to them. And now one of the guys who was in charge of those writings is a deputy minister. The minister himself is not very far from those ideas. So what was an NGO or think tank agenda now becomes state policy, or so they declare. We don't know what will happen, but they will say that they will reorganize local governments according to those writings that they had years before. So these are 2 examples, and there are many more, but unfortunately this only happens when government changes.
So basically they became nationalized, the Georgian think tanks, but we hope that revolving doors will be working always around, and now there's a new wave of new Georgian think tanks set up by the former people who are in government, so at least we have some rotation going on.
Там ще питання з залу. Давайте 3 питання і все, тому що потім відповіді.
Якщо можна коротко, тому що у нас вже час вичерпується.
Спробую коротко. Мене звуть Сергій Барткевич, я представляю коаліцію «Зупинимо туберкульоз». Тобто у нас немає проблеми, чим займатися, і проблема полягає в іншому. Я, користуючись нагодою, хотів би подякувати фонду «Відродження». Це єдиний донор в Україні, який досить тривалий час підтримує наші ініціативи, спрямовані на покращення державної політики. Я хотів сказати буквально ось. Значить, от сьогодні, що я почув? 2 речі мені дуже сподобалися. Це продовольче, яку Ерік підняв, проблема, вона якось оживила. Да? І от коли говорили про те, що така міжнародна традиція, що ті люди, які знаходяться по цю сторону барикад, вони такі розумні. Да? А от ті, які приймають рішення, вони не тільки комікси розуміють. Тобто це такий пансіонат для трошки, розумієте, для дуже розумних людей. Але ж розумних, да? Бо мають свій інтерес. От я хотів би запитати, що в Україні ситуація така, що всі політичні рішення, всі зміни, або переважно більшість з них приймається, вони кажуть, ребята, ви хочете мати оце, це і це. Значить, робіть те, те і те. І виходить, що в такому розумінні всі аналітичні центри знаходяться там, звідки йде такий запит. Так? Що стосується таких проблем, як проблема туберкульозу, то я хочу сказати, що, наприклад, загальнодержавну програму прийняли за 10 хвилин. Загальнодержавну програму боротьби з захворюванням туберкульозу. Що свідчить про те, що люди не розуміють, що вони роблять. Тому я хочу запитати шановних наших експертів з інших країн. Чи не здається вам, що, або у вас була така ситуація, у нас така є, що в інших питаннях, які не дуже торкаються можновладців, і кожен займає свій номер, да? І йому дуже зручно знаходитися на цьому номері, нічого не змінюючи. Лікарям не хочеться змінювати нічого, тому що вони втратять свою практику, політикам не хочеться змінювати, тому що вони не дуже розуміють, що це за проблема, люди взагалі не ознайомлені, і ситуація залишається невирішеною. І яку б ми не взяли проблему, не тільки туберкульоз, яка не виходить за межі інтересів, які диктуються ззовні, вона так і залишається. Кожен на своїй позиції, бо так зручно. От як в ваших країнах долалася така ситуація, що ви все ж таки вийшли на більш високий рівень?
Дякую.
Буквально коротко. Надія Добрянська з центру політики правних реформ. У мене питання, можливо, ви могли коротко сказати про управління якістю досліджень. Якісь хороші приклади, погані приклади.
I'm Yevhen Shulha from the Rosenkopf Center. Oh, maybe I should speak Ukrainian, so you don't take off your headphones. Розкажіть, будь ласка. Розкажіть, будь ласка, дайте, будь ласка, кілька прикладів з ваших організацій про те, як у вас організовано the governance, правління вашими організаціями. Чи є у вас члени організації, чи платять вони членські внески, чи обирають вони правління, скільки цих членів, хто може стати членом, тобто як працює governance structure у ваших аналітичних центрах? Дякую.
Якщо можна, не обов'язково, you don't have to answer all the questions, you can choose where you have most to contribute so that we don't take too much over time.
I'll skip the first question because I've had the good fortune of always working in more or less imperfect democracies. And that's clearly, that question is very much related to the public space and how free that is. Research quality management, we do virtually everything through peer review. Sometimes it's internal peer review, and sometimes in broader projects, I actually have a steering committee of experts which I bring in, and they go through. So everything we write goes through various stages of comments. We go through various drafts with comments, suggestions, rewriting. I rewrite a lot of stuff by other people. So that's how we manage quality. And ditto for the methodology. When you're working on a project, if you bring in experts and you share the structure, the methodological approach with other people, then you can get feedback. So that's the way we do it. On governance, where I work, we're governed by committee, even in an exaggerated way, in the sense that sometimes it takes 5 people to make a silly decision. And that's the internal structure. And externally, formally, we also have an advisory council and a governing board. And I suppose the governing board is the one making the big decisions. And then the way the EPC is supporting itself, we have 3 sources of funding. One is through membership. Another one is through donors. We have foundations which support the EPC. And the third source, it's about a third, perhaps more than a third now, of source of income is through projects. So we are fundraising for our projects as well. So this is a kind of way to ensure independence, because we can't be closely associated to any one of these sources. We can't be accused of being the cover-up for a specific interest. But it's hard work because it means that each of us is actually working on 3 different fronts in terms of ensuring financing.
As regards the first question or comment, I can only say that even in countries which have pretty much working democratic system, there are such areas as where vested interests are so strong that it's very difficult for think tanks and other NGOs to make a difference and to go against this vested interest. I think healthcare system in Poland is one such case that it's. We have tried to do something about the way that where reforms are going, but you know, clashing with the doctors' lobby, it's a very huge challenge, and I don't see any actors who could sort of represent the public interest here when the government doesn't want to do its job. So it's not only, I think it's a question also for many democracies, a weakness of civil society capacity. Sorry?
All the unhealthy guys.
Yes. Quality management. I can only add to what has been said that I think we have to be aware of the limitations. I mean, peer review is always what you hear as a response, but you have to clearly know who the peers are. And especially, I think that you have to be cautious of commissioning reviews from the academic environment, because there are not that many academics who actually, they can have lots of knowledge, but the understanding of policy process and policy relevance, it's very often limited even among people who are recognized authorities in a given field. So I think that it's not enough to have a report peer reviewed by a professor or someone like this. We usually try to combine one review by an academic with one review by a policymaker. But the crucial thing, I think, is that you have to have a strong internal review, and even more crucial thing is that you have to have good, well-trained researchers who can read each other's paper and comment. And this is, I think, the strongest precaution against publishing something which is not up to the sort of, which is not good enough, I would say. And I don't think I can say much about governance structure. It's a long story. We don't have time, but I will be talking about the sustainability tomorrow, so maybe I will also say about how we change our governance structure to make our organization more sustainable. So anyone who is interested is very welcome to come and listen to this story. Thank you.
This is very good, Jacek, that you mentioned it. Я просто хочу так само нагадати від організаторів, що там є скринька ззовні з питаннями, які ви хочете задати донорам. І вони попросили, щоб ви ці запитання завтра, які будуть обговорюватися, кинули там скриньку назовні. Давайте, let's continue with the answers.
Okay, 2 really short remarks. One, the research quality management, I could just repeat from several aspects the things that we have already heard. I had a professor who told me something really important. If you need really good quality management for a paper, for example, you should send it to someone who is good in this field but doesn't really like you. The reason is that he will be extremely happy to take it to small pieces and to criticize every sentence possible. But by the end of the day, you will end up with a really good paper, and you can even mention him as one of the reviewers, and he can be happy about it. But I think he will be interested in the thing that you are writing, because he he want to criticize it with his best qualities. But generally, we are doing internally the peer reviews, especially with the analysis that we are producing for the press or short remarks or flash analysis that are prepared 1 or 2 hours after a news item appeared. Of course, we don't have the time to send it to external reviewers, but of course at longer studies we try to do it. And as for governance structure, our principle is that we are making the filtering of the staff pretty strictly. I mean that this is not easy to get into the organization, and most of the colleagues I'm working with are working there for several years because it's really difficult to find good colleagues. But we try to, it will sound easy, of course it's not so easy to implement. We try to find really good people who are good on the field that they are doing and reliable, and in a sense that they want to work for the organization, not just for themselves and building themselves, and then try to keep them in a way that try not to over bureaucratize and over hierarchize, making too strict hierarchy in the organization, give as much independence as possible to the colleagues if they are really good enough, and handle them as partners and not as subordinates, and it works most of the time.